Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our new show, The Weekly Assignment, where executive producer Sam Osterhout and I talk with you about what's coming up on Lincoln Square this week, the latest headlines, and what we can do to fight back against authoritarianism. And we also have some of our friends who help contribute to Lincoln Square. They'll be stopping by on our shows as well. Coming up in a little bit, we'll have on Brian Datesman. He's the founder of The Intellectualist, and you've probably read several of his articles on Lincoln Square, and you can also find them on his own Substack and on many different platforms. But first, Sam, I thought we would talk a little bit about a different story. Trump is losing ground with a group that he actually cares about, and that would be podcast bros. And I wanted to talk with you a little bit about this because I know that this is not really something that you and I might necessarily listen to. But I mean, Joe Rogan has the top, podcast in America. Theo is very popular. There are a lot of podcasters out there that blend entertainment and politics and really have a foothold with a young male audience. And Trump was really successful during the 2024 election. But a lot of those same people who platformed him and kind of gave him this stamp of approval, like this guy is cool, even though he's 80 years old and we've seen him before, but he kind of got a new lease on life, I think, through him with like their stamp of approval. But, how significant do you think it is that some of these people who have really large platforms are turning against him?
First, I'm so excited to have this new. I mean, I know we show up every Monday and all of this, but it's a new branding and it feels more cohesive, and I love these conversations. It's such a good way to start the week and like get centered, and I hope everyone in the audience thinks so too. Hi, Maxine. I got your email. Lovely. Thank you for sending that. Yeah, so I think I have two thoughts about the podcast situation. One is that who cares? That's the first thought, is that they are media drivers, they're opinion creators, they're sort of culture drivers to a large degree, and I think that us putting our faith in them was a mistake to begin with, but they're vacillating between one opinion and the other is not so surprising. But I think the thing that potentially could make it a big deal is that Trump's margins are so slim in polling, and he's underwater, and he has this rugged and calcified base of around 30% that will, as we've always said, never, ever, ever, ever leave him.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that that's entirely true. I think people do change. But because the margin's so thin, if you can get 0.5%, if you can get 1%, if you can peel away that layer, big implications. So I'm not giving up on young men yet. I don't know. What's your take on it?
Well, I know that in Behind the Numbers, Rick and Andrew Wilson have talked a lot about how Trump's numbers with young men have really fallen. So clearly that's got to be a concern for Trump in the White House. I feel like during the 2024 election, a lot of these guys like Adin Ross and the guy who hosts the Flagrant podcast, Andrew Schulz. We actually had a great commentary by Evan Fields where he talked specifically about this podcast and Pete Buttigieg coming on. I think we have that article, Sam.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But so during the 2024 election, I feel like these podcast guys thought like Trump was this middle finger to authority and to conventions, and he was cool because like a guy like him shouldn't be president. But now like they're grappling like the rest of us that he's kind of an asshole, right? And
Yeah.
not only that, but when you are the leader of the free world, you have an enormous amount of power, and you start using that power for really awful ends, like rounding up children in cities across America, whether they're citizens or not, and ripping them away from their parents.
Yeah.
And even a guy like Joe Rogan, who kind of seems like he's above everything, like everything's just a game and who cares, even he was like, what the hell is going on here? What are you doing? And Theo was like, do not use my image to sell the Department of Homeland Security. Like, take it down. And so because culture is so intertwined with politics these days, I do think that it's significant, and it's worth talking about. And I thought it was kind of amusing that Adin Ross, who had he was the guy who like gave Trump one of those awful Teslas that you laugh at.
Oh, right. Oh my God. Yeah.
But he was like, I'm getting a real backlash to supporting this guy because like suddenly everybody holds me responsible for everything that Trump's doing. And wait, this kind of sucks. I don't like it. And like, yes, that's a lesson that most of us have learned at this point in our lives. And, you can say, oh, that's adorable. But yet, it's telling that there is a backlash, just like we saw a backlash to Disney taking Jimmy Kimmel off the air. I think there's been this idea for the last 9 months, really pushed by the corporate media, that Trump is popular and he's inevitable and he's all powerful. And even people who have supported him, are questioning that and saying, wait, there's a downside to supporting Trump. And my bad, I didn't quite get that.
I think you're right, and you said something that there was sort of pleasure in his stirring the pot, right? And he serves at the will of his base, really. And in 2016, he got buy-in because of that stirring of the pot, and because of young men to some degree, the tip of the spear of a kind of bro culture, and how that trickles down. And they were like, yeah, he's funny. Like, he's a funny guy. And for how many years did we waste our breath saying, well, some people take him seriously, but not literally. And some, it's a waste of time to discuss that. But I think that there is this moment now where they're like, oh, it's not super funny, the stuff he's doing. And he's actually not a troll. He's like a real
tyrant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also I think it doesn't help that he's so doddering now. And and he looks just like like he used to be kind of one of them, an aspirational figure. Like, oh yeah, I want to grow up and hit the clubs like Donald Trump and do all the things.
But like that was in the 70s when Trump
exactly. And now they're like, oh, I think he might wear diapers, and I feel like he's just a sad figure of a human. And it's no longer aspirational. I don't think, at least. I don't know. I could be wrong.
No, I mean, I think it's significant that, South Park goes after him and his administration every week. And those are guys who are equal opportunity offenders, and for a long time, they've been like, why would we make fun of Trump? Everybody does. That's boring. But, even they've seen just what his administration has been like for the last 9 months. And they're like, yeah, let's put him in bed with Satan. Let's put him in the desert in a diaper and naked. Let's really just defenestrate him in front of everyone. And it's been a joy to watch.
Yeah, Maya May talks about this all the time on Punching Up, which if you guys haven't checked out, I know most of you in the chat definitely have. I see your names in there all the time, but she has comedians on because comedy is wildly powerful. And if you don't believe that, then just imagine Jimmy Kimmel, right? It is, I think, satire and comedy and peaceful protest are two of the great underdogs of our civil liberties and freedom. Um, watch Punching Up. She always has comedians on, and it is always like not only sad and dark, but funny and illuminating. But that's it. That's it.
Absolutely. Well, I'm looking forward to us welcoming our guest this week, which is a change for how we've been doing this show, and we're really excited about it. Brian Datesman is going to join us, and he is the founder of The Intellectualist, and I'm sure you've read his work on his Substack, probably on Lincoln Square. Thanks so much for being here, Brian.
It's really nice to be with you, Susan. Nice to be with you, Sam. Thanks for having me.
Brian. It's great, and great to meet you, by the way. We were all having a conversation in the green room before we started the live, and I was saying to Brian that let me see if I can find it here. I was reading this piece today, and there's already been another decision, right? The scope of news. So it's not just Trump blocking the Oregon National Guard, it's not just the judge blocking the Oregon National Guard, but now all National Guards nationally for 14 days or something like that. And I was like, this news cycle is so fast. I don't know how to keep up. Brian, how do you keep up with this? What are you doing?
That's a really great question, Sam. I don't know if it's possible to keep up with all the news, and I don't know if it would necessarily be mentally healthy to try to keep up with all the news, unfortunately. And what I try to do when looking through this is try to see maybe a bigger picture. And maybe that will help connect all these different pieces, because like you said, there was 24 hours. It seems like it could have been a week ago, 2 weeks ago. And how do we connect all these disparate pieces, what we're seeing in terms of authoritarianism in our country coming together? And I think part of that is, and which is so great about Lincoln Square is that so many of your followers are active and civically engaged. And really, that's what's important. And no one's going to catch everything, but try to read the newspapers, try to see what's going around you, and at the very least, speak with your neighbors, because unfortunately, as we're seeing, I do believe things are rapidly deteriorating.
And Brian, you do such a great job of keeping your finger on the pulse of what's going on. I mean, you keep up so well on the news of the day. We ran a great story from you last week on how the Trump administration has been cutting DHS grants. But then you also do a lot of longer form pieces, historical pieces, where you kind of connect what's going on today with the not so distant past, especially hearkening back to past dictators like in Nazi Germany. And you bring the receipts because all of your pieces are just extremely well sourced. So how are you able to do those deep dives so well? I really admire it.
Well, it's a lot of it has to do with just listening to what people are actually saying. And I think the president of the United States is very clear with what he's been saying. And he's been very clear since 2015. And if you look at what he's been saying and say, who does this sound like? If you look at historical well-known actors, particularly from the 20th century, it's hard not to leave with the belief that there are similarities between the current president of the United States and the authoritarian figures of the past. Many of these figures we look at as villains in the American, in terms of American history. For instance, when people say when Donald Trump called the press the enemy of the people, that actually has a long history.
Right. Press is the German word for it.
Right. And that goes back, and a lot of these go back, unfortunately, to two of the worst ideologies of the 20th century, which were frankly related, though they were often described as in opposition, which was the Soviet Union, their version of communism, and Nazi Germany's fascism. And both of those were against everything that makes America great, right? Our freedoms, our speech, our diversity, our different, our ability to see neighbors and have totally different opinions and have a dinner with them and remain friends. Everything that makes us great, these dictators were against, because they wanted to replace the individual with the state and their ego. And if you look at what is happening now in the United States, it's hard not to leave with the conclusion that the current president of the United States wants to replace the U.S. Constitution with his ego and what his personal beliefs are over everything else. And you see this being inflicted on Americans right now, whether it's with the National Guard, right? I don't believe the people in California or in Washington want the National Guard there. That's not my impression. Yet they're there. And why is that? It's because the president is trying to inflict his will on a democratic population, a blue state, right? As a means of punishment. And this has no foundation in American history or in our political culture. And frankly, when you ask me, Susan, and you say, how do you see, history and references? It's because it's right in front of us. It doesn't take much intellectual firepower. You just look at history, you see what's been said, and you say that looks similar. It's as simple as that, unfortunately.
Yeah, we have some in the chat, referencing the Goebbels plagiarism by Stephen Miller. It's not just similar. It's like parallel and mapped. It's like they're taking tracing paper and just putting it over the Nazi regime and just
outlining it. Yeah. I mean, if you look at it too, and we don't like to talk about this because Americans, we don't like to compare our leaders to hated historical figures. We just don't. And it's considered a taboo, frankly. And for good reason, because I think references to people like Hitler and Stalin are often overdone. And poorly analogous, but there are similarities, and I think that if we are to overlook them, it is to our detriment. For instance, Hitler, he originally incited a coup, and he was considered a traitor to the Weimar Republic. Eventually, though, he was able to, through the help of elites who gave him support, saw him as a vehicle for their political ambitions, the press. Who kind of didn't take him seriously and thought he was a joke, which in many ways he was, but he was a very dangerous one.
Right.
And his mind, and that with Stalin eventually helped create conditions that led to World War II, where 80 to 100 million human beings perished. Right. And so there are big consequences for this behavior. And I think we need to be very direct about that. We're at an inflection point in history that is, frankly, I think if you're paying attention, it's very scary. We have heard very clearly that the president of China wants to invade Taiwan by 2027. He wants the PLA ready. We know from intelligence that Russia has intentions. Maybe they're not going to do it, but they would like to invade Eastern Europe, right? And yet we have a president of the United States now who is either shows obsequiousness, indifference, appeasement in the face of this, while instead of focusing his attention on these very malign adversarial foreign actors, he is focusing his attention on people in California and Portland, right? And so if you weigh all these things, we're in very dangerous territory, regardless of if that's believed or not, or understood or not by the greater populace. The reality is that we're in a very dangerous place in terms of international security, national security, and then we also have accelerants that are not being dealt with, like climate change.
Right. And it's unbelievable to think about the fact that our January 6th riot is very analogous to the beer hall push that, helped that, during the time of Hitler. And I think a lot of us, myself included, felt like we got past that moment in history. We had a new president. we escaped that danger, and now here we are in the second Trump regime, and it's far worse than the first. Brian, can you talk with us a little bit about some of the stories we can look forward to from you this week? What are you working on?
Well, so Susan, thank you for asking me that. I just launched our Substack, sort of getting ready for Substack and trying to determine, what are stories that people want to learn about and read about. And today we launched our premium edition. It's going to be called A History of the Present. And we began, this series talking about a former spiritual advisor of the current president of the United States, a gentleman. I don't want to say gentleman, actually, that'd be the wrong word. A very malign actor who recently pled guilty to child sexual abuse. And the story is about how this man and the president of the United States, while claiming to be the protectors of the people who are looking to them, right? Their followers, they're looking to them for guidance. And, maybe it seems unconventional or to us for the fact that people might be looking for guidance from these sources, but they are in meaning, and how, unfortunately, we're seeing how they're actually treated, they're exploited. The same people who are looking for guidance and for community and love, frankly, are being exploited by the same sources that they're looking to for the positive things, right? And so we talk about in this essay the juxtaposition is how the wolf in sheep's clothing, right? And that is a parable that goes back many, many, many centuries, right? The idea that people who present themselves may not be who they are. And this sort of, and we sort of examine this in the idea of facade versus the house, where this is facade, but what's really going on behind there, right? And that sort of deep dive, I think, is really what the intellectuals wants to do going forward when we look at democracy, the AI and technology, and how that's going to have a major impact on civilization going forward. Also climate change, right? And how all of these things, though they seem interrelated, how they really all come down to our individual choices. And instead of feeling negative, we should feel empowered. But the question is, how do we get there?
Yeah, that's fascinating. I was having a conversation this weekend with someone who said that our water tables in my region are down 75% this year, and which is dramatic. And I keep tabs on climate stuff because it's important to me, but it's not coming out in the way, because there's a flood of other stories. But these are real problems that we're currently having to ignore to just stop the bleeding.
Right.
Yeah, and it's all related too, right? Because what's going on with climate change is also a function of the degradation of our democracy. Totally. Because inequality and the increase of democracy, you could look at beginning of supply side economics, right? Beginning with the presidency really of Ronald Reagan in early 1980 and that first tax cut. And you'll see the rise of the deficit, U.S. national debt, inequality, but also the degradation of our democracy, right? Mm-hmm. And they're perfectly correlated, or almost perfectly correlated. And the question is, why is that? And I think we see that is that the same interests that are able to keep climate change as a non-issue, or to claim that it doesn't actually exist, are also the same people who are helping fund our political system, and giving it the appearance of a democracy, while in many ways it operates, unfortunately, as anything but.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's right. Man, there's so much I want to talk to you about. I want to just keep going and going. Will you come back and join us again?
I would love to come back. You guys have always been supporters, and I love the work you're doing in terms of civic engagement. And I think it's very positive because, an informed citizen is a powerful citizen. And so the work being done here is, I would love to be part of it. So anytime, Sam.
I appreciate that. And we're big fans. First of all, we're not just supporters, but we're big fans of yours. And I also love that you mention community, because it's such a big part of what we're trying to do. And I always look off screen because I'm reading the chat and this chat is amazing. People are putting like book, Patrick, I think, did I see a book recommendation in there from you? I mean, this is it becomes a kind of dialogue. And anyway, I really appreciate you being on with us today.
Of course. And I do appreciate it as well. Thank you for having me.
Yes, we'll have you back soon. Thanks, Brian.
Oh, that was great. And we have a really, really great week coming up for everyone on Lincoln Square. Why don't we talk about what's coming up with you later on today, Sam? You have the Lieutenant Governor of New York coming on.
Yeah.
That will be great.
That'll be a good one. He is challenging Hochul for in primary this June. And I'm just really curious about this kind of insurgency in the Democratic Party. I want to know more. I want to know more about what he wants to do, what his plan is, his thoughts on Schumer and the old guard and Mamdani and all of these things. He's a really fascinating guy. So I'm excited for that conversation. It's going to be great.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. New York politics. I've long been fascinated because I know you have a lot of factionalism within the Democratic Party, but that really seems to have gone national this year with Zoran's, campaign that just took everyone by storm for mayor. And now it seems like there is a real challenge to the old order that's fascinating to watch.
Yeah, it's going to be, I think that's going to be the story. I mean, I hope that's the story. I hope that this party becomes invigorated in some way. I hope they need, I don't know, more coffee or something, but what else do we have coming up? I was just trying to look at my notes.
On strategy session, which is at 5 on Tuesday. We've got, of course, Rick Wilson and Joe Trippi will be there, but Miles Taylor will be their special guest. And the timing couldn't be better with, of course, the indictment of James Comey and with Donald Trump hell-bent on trying to make his political enemies pay. And of course, that's something that Miles Taylor is an alum from Trump 1 turned, big critic. He knows firsthand.
Yeah. I mean, man, they always get such good guests on strategy session. And this week, man, I was just going over the schedule. We have, I think, 15 or 16 live shows this week, and they're all so compelling. Who do you have for first draft?
I have Lisa Graves, who writes the Courts newsletter for Courier Newsroom, and she has a brand new book out, so it's great timing. It's called Without Precedent, and it is a history of the Roberts Court. And she has been reporting on John Roberts for decades and, really has some interesting insights going back to his confirmation process during the George W. Bush presidency, but even before, when he was a political operative who, worked on everything behind the scenes with the Gore versus Bush election that, of course, was determined by the Supreme Court. But with the Supreme Court emerging as such a powerful force in dismantling our democracy right now, I think it's a great time for us to look into who John Roberts is and what his vision really is for the country, beyond that very affable, smile that he's always wearing.
It reminds me, I'm just Googling this real quick. So I'm reading this book right now, and we'll be interviewing the author. The book is called Opus, and I know that some of you in chats when I'm on with Andrew Watkins have referenced the book, but it's by Gareth Gore. And I don't think John Roberts is a member of Opus Dei, but this book is about Opus Dei, the secretive elite. But I do think there are a couple of Supreme Court justices who are in Opus Dei, but many of their sort of missions align.
Right.
I look for that conversation, because I think that's an interesting tie-in, and it's I mean, in any other time this would feel like a Da Vinci Code Part 2 or something, just so unbelievably weird as to be fictional, but it's just not.
Well, and really there seems to be some evidence that JD Vance, the vice president, is at least somewhat interested, if not affiliated, with Opus Dei, along with his mentor Peter Thiel, the big tech billionaire who funded his Senate campaign, and is probably largely responsible for the fact that we all have to endure JD Vance now as the vice president. But there are a lot of really powerful figures in Washington who believe in this, extremist version of Catholicism that most people do not, and is at total odds with our current Pope, Pope Bob from Chicago, who has the traditional "let's help the poor" version of Catholicism.
Yeah, well, Patrick said Leonard Leo's Opus Dei, Alito is Opus Dei, and I'm just at the very first part of the book where he's talking about how the last Pope was starting to rein them in.
Pope Francis.
Man, they are just flush with money. It's a problem.
Yeah, it is. I want to give a shout out to a new feature that Evan Fields is writing for us. It's the weekly wrap, and we've heard from a lot of you, you're interested in our shows, but you're not really interested in necessarily watching all of them because, let's face it, we put out a lot of content. We get it. You have a life. But frankly, I love reading things. If I have the choice between watching a 5-minute video or reading a 1,000-word article, I will read the 1,000-word article. I just, I love, that format. And so now you can kind of get an insight into maybe some of the shows that you've missed, some of the interviews you didn't have time for. And we've got excerpts just, of these great shows that we have every week. It arrives in your inbox on Sunday. And, if you want to go and look at the video afterwards, feel free. But you can also hit the transcript button on any of our shows, and you can read the transcript as well. It's a great feature on all of our lives. So just wanted to flag that for everyone.
Yeah, Persephone said, I'm the opposite. I love the lives. Persephone.
We appreciate that.
Persephone Scissorhands is her name, and I love it. I always love seeing her in the chat. Yeah, lots of stuff coming up.
Absolutely. It's going to be a really good week. But before we go, we are going to go through kind of the weekly assignment for all of us, not just you. This is for all of us here at Lincoln Square as well. And this week, with the government still being shut down, and I talked with Everett Kelly yesterday, actually came in on a Sunday, which was great. He's the head of AFGE, the largest federal government worker union in DC. But we have this devastating government shutdown. Even though Trump and Republicans control every branch of government, they've shut down the government to hold us hostage. They're threatening to fire thousands of government workers. The Veterans Hotline is not working for people. It's going to get even worse. And so for this week, we are going to ask everyone, call your member of Congress, your senator. Here are the switchboards where you can get connected. And it doesn't matter if your member of Congress is a Republican or a Democrat. Everybody should get the message that this shutdown is having a devastating impact on not just federal workers. It's affecting all of us. It's affecting our economy at a time where we cannot afford any more negative impacts to our economy. So it's time to stop the game playing, stop the hostage taking, and stop this shutdown.
Yeah, let's get it over. And if you do call, we'd love to hear about it. You can always put your experience in the chat. I think one of these days I really want to put out an invite for video from our audience. I would love to hear your stories and even put them on air.
Absolutely. Yeah. And in the future on the weekly assignment, we definitely want to feature comments, videos, posts from all of you because you are part of our community. And if you've not yet subscribed, please consider subscribing to Lincoln Square. You can be a free subscriber if you want to support our work. We would really appreciate if you would become a paid subscriber as well.
Yeah, always important. Well, thanks, Susan.
Thanks, Sam. And thanks for being here for our maiden journey. And we'll look forward to seeing you next week.
Yeah. And tune in later today when I talk to Antonio Delgado. Be a good one. Thanks all.